"You saved my life. Now you must be my husband," the Apache widow told the rancher. The sun rose slowly over the rugged Arizona desert, painting the rocky cliffs and wide plains in soft gold. Dust floated in the air, stirred by the light morning breeze, and the distant hills shimmered with the heat that would come later in the day. On the edge of one of these hills sat a small ranch, built from weathered wood and rough stones, standing strong against the winds and heat. This was John Mercer's home, a place he had built with his own hands after losing his parents at a young age and learning early that life was hard and you had to be tougher. John was a tall man with broad shoulders, sun-darkened skin, and hair that had begun to show streaks of gray despite his youth. He had always been quiet, preferring the company of his horses, his cattle, and the open sky to that of other people. His days began before sunrise and ended long after sunset, filled with feeding the animals, repairing fences, tending the small vegetable garden, and keeping the ranch running smoothly. Life had taught him that the world did not hand anything over easily, and he had grown used to the solitude that came with living in such a remote place. This particular morning, however, was different. As John moved toward the water trough to feed the horses, he noticed something unusual near the edge of the ridge that bordered his property. There, among the scrub and the rocks, was a figure lying motionless. At first he thought it might be a fallen branch or perhaps a lost animal, but as he came closer he realized it was a young woman. Her long, dark hair was tangled with dust, and her clothes, made of soft leather and cloth, were torn in places. Her skin was pale with weakness, and her shallow breathing told him she was in trouble. Without hesitation, John lifted her into his arms. She was surprisingly light for someone of her age and size, but she seemed too weak to even hold herself up. As he carried her toward the ranch house, he noticed a deep bruise on her arm and several scratches on her legs. Her face was streaked with dirt, but there was a quiet dignity in her features that made John pause. He had seen hardship before, but there was something different about this woman, a calm strength, even in her weakness. Inside the small ranch house, John laid her gently on the bed he had made himself, the mattress covered with a clean but simple sheet. He fetched water and damp cloths to clean her face and hands, speaking in a soft voice as he worked. "You're safe now. Just rest," he said. She stirred slightly, opening her dark eyes, but did not speak. Her gaze, steady and unafraid, met his, and in that moment John felt a strange mix of worry and curiosity. Days passed, and John watched over her closely. He fed her small meals of bread, milk, and boiled vegetables, coaxing her to eat when she seemed reluctant. Each day she grew stronger, able to sit up and then slowly stand with his help. He learned that her name was Ahioka, a name that sounded soft and strong at the same time. She did not speak much of her past at first, only that she had been traveling alone when an accident had left her injured. John did not push. He knew that people healed at their own pace, and trust could not be forced. As she regained her strength, Ahioka began to help around the ranch. She fed the chickens, swept the floors, and even learned to help with the horses under John's careful guidance. He was surprised at how quickly she adapted to the work, moving with a natural grace and attention to detail. Her hands, though small, were strong and sure, and her eyes, dark and thoughtful, often seemed to notice things he had missed. At night, they would sit outside under the vast sky, listening to the soft rustle of the wind through the desert grass and the distant call of a coyote. John felt a warmth he had not known in years, a quiet companionship that was comforting rather than burdensome. Even so, there were moments of tension. John, born and raised in the ways of the frontier, had a practical mind and a cautious heart. He worried about how others in the nearby settlements would view a stranger, especially a woman alone, staying on his land. Ahioka, on the other hand, had her own customs and ways of seeing the world. She moved with a sense of respect for the land and for life, often pausing to speak softly to the plants or animals, a habit John found strange but oddly calming. Sometimes their differences led to small disagreements about how to mend a fence, when to water the crops, or how to handle a sick animal. But these moments were brief, and they quickly found a rhythm in their daily work. One evening, after the chores were done and the sun had dipped behind the hills, John found Ahioka sitting by the small fireplace, carefully braiding a piece of leather cord. She looked up at him and smiled, a simple gesture that seemed to hold a world of meaning. "You have saved my life," she said quietly, her voice soft but firm. John nodded, unsure how to respond. Words felt insufficient for the bond that had quietly grown between them. "I'm just glad you're safe," he said at last. Their days became a routine, yet each day carried a subtle tension of unspoken questions. Ahioka's eyes often lingered on John in ways that made him uncomfortable, yet he could not deny the warmth that filled the room when she was near. He began to notice small gestures, how she would place the food on his plate just so, or how she remembered which horse preferred which kind of feed. It was not love, not yet, but it was something deeper than mere gratitude. One morning, as the wind swept across the open plains and the sun turned the desert a brilliant orange, John noticed Ahioka walking near the edge of the ridge again. This time she seemed unsteady, and he hurried to her side. She had been collecting herbs and plants, something she had begun to teach him about, explaining how certain leaves could soothe aches or prevent infection. John watched her carefully, noting how she moved with a quiet awareness of the land, stepping lightly among rocks and thorny bushes. When she turned to him with a small bundle of herbs, her eyes caught the morning light, and John felt an unfamiliar emotion stirring, something that was respect, admiration, and a hint of something more. As the days turned into weeks, their connection deepened. Ahioka began to speak more of her life before the accident, telling stories of her family, her village, and the people she had known. John listened intently, fascinated by a world so different from his own, yet filled with the same joys, fears, and hopes. He realized that he had been living a life of routine, missing the small wonders of companionship and shared experience. Ahioka, too, seemed to soften, her initial wariness giving way to a cautious trust in John's character. One afternoon, while repairing a section of fence that had been damaged in a storm, John paused to watch Ahioka working with the animals. She moved among the horses, gently calming a young colt that had been spooked by the wind. The way she handled the animal, with patience and understanding, left John silently admiring her. He realized that saving her life had not been just an act of kindness. It had brought someone extraordinary into his world. That evening, as the sky turned pink and purple and the first stars appeared, Ahioka spoke again, her voice quiet but steady. "I owe you everything," she said, "and I will never forget it." John looked at her, feeling the weight of her words. He had saved her body, but in return, she had begun to save a part of his heart he had long kept hidden. They sat in silence for a long time, letting the cool desert air carry away their thoughts, neither rushing to speak, both understanding that something significant had begun. In the days that followed, life on the ranch settled into a new pattern. John and Ahioka worked side by side, sharing meals, stories, and the small routines that made their remote life possible. Each day brought a deeper sense of connection, though neither yet dared to name it. For John, the frontier no longer felt quite so lonely, and for Ahioka, the world beyond her village had become a place where trust and care could flourish. The story of their first meeting, her injury, and the slow, careful recovery had become a shared memory that neither would forget. And while the desert stretched endlessly around them, harsh and unforgiving, the small ranch had become a place of healing, hope, and the quiet beginnings of a bond that neither time nor distance could easily break. The days grew warmer as spring settled over the Arizona desert. The sun climbed higher each morning, casting long shadows across the ranch and turning the rocks and sand into shades of gold and red. John and Ahioka had fallen into a rhythm that felt natural, yet beneath it, a quiet tension began to take shape. Their friendship and shared work created closeness, but it also raised questions neither had yet spoken aloud. Ahioka had grown stronger, her step confident, and her hands steady. She moved among the animals with ease, feeding the chickens, brushing the horses, and tending to the vegetable garden with a careful touch. John watched her work from a distance sometimes, marveling at her ability to handle even the smallest creatures with patience and respect. It was a skill he had never fully appreciated before, how care and attention could change the outcome of every task, from feeding a horse to planting a seed. One afternoon, as they mended a fence along the northern edge of the property, Ahioka paused and looked out across the desert, her eyes scanning the horizon as if searching for something unseen. John noticed the look and walked over. "What is it?" he asked, wiping sweat from his brow. Ahioka hesitated for a moment before speaking. "In my village," she said slowly, "we have traditions. Some of them are about honor and some about gratitude. When someone saves your life, it is not only remembered, it is repaid." Her voice was calm but firm, and John felt a small knot of unease tighten in his chest. He had suspected there were parts of her world he did not understand, but hearing her speak it aloud made it real. "I don't know what you mean," he said cautiously. Ahioka turned to him, her dark eyes steady. "It is not something I can explain in one sentence, but in my culture, a life given in care creates a bond that is respected and honored. Sometimes it is expected that the bond leads to marriage." John took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her words. He had always believed in helping people out of kindness, not obligation. He had never imagined that saving a life could carry such a responsibility. Yet he also felt a deep respect for her belief, for the strength it took to live by her traditions in a world that often did not understand them. I don't know what to say, he admitted. Say nothing yet, Ahioka replied softly. Just know it is not a demand. It is a truth of my people, and now it is a truth that touches both of us. He continued to teach Ahioka about life on the ranch, the care of the livestock, the management of water, and the repair of fences and roofs. But he also found himself thinking more about her words. He began to notice little things he had ignored before, how she watched the birds for signs of weather, how she moved quietly at night to check the animals, how she remembered details about every plant and tree on the land. There was wisdom in her movements, a depth he had not seen in the people he usually met. Ahioka, on her part, tried to respect John's world as well. She learned to ride the horses with confidence, handling the reins and understanding their moods. She helped him with the cattle, not with fear or hesitation, but with careful observation and steady hands. Yet despite her growing comfort on the ranch, there were moments when she felt uncertain. John was kind, but he did not yet understand the depth of her customs. She wondered how she could convey the importance of what she had said without frightening him or creating tension between them. One morning, a small problem arose that tested both of them. A young colt had slipped near the edge of the creek and become stuck in a shallow ravine. Ahioka rushed to the animal, her voice calm and gentle, urging it to stay still while John fetched ropes and a sturdy branch to help lift it out. Together they worked carefully, their movements synchronized without much thought, and soon the colt was free, trembling but unharmed. John watched her, realizing for the first time how deeply he had come to rely on her presence. It was not just the help with chores or the knowledge of the land, it was her patience, her understanding, her calmness in the face of stress. He felt a warmth in his chest that was unfamiliar, a mix of admiration and something softer that he could not yet name. After the colt was safe, they sat together by the creek, letting the water run over their hands and listening to the soft murmur of the stream. Ahioka looked at John, her expression serious. "You have done so much for me," she said, "but life is not just about what you give. It is also about what you accept. Sometimes accepting is harder than giving." "I think I understand," he said, "but some things I've never had to face before. I don't know how to feel or what to do." Ahioka smiled faintly. "That is why we take one step at a time. Trust and understanding cannot be rushed. They grow slowly, like the plants you care for." Their bond grew in quiet ways. They shared meals, often simple but with laughter and conversation. Ahioka told stories of her childhood in the mountains, of festivals, of her family, and of lessons learned from elders who had long passed. John listened intently, fascinated by the depth of her experiences, and sometimes he shared his own memories, of his parents, of the hardships of the frontier, and of the loneliness he had felt since losing them. Each story built a bridge between their worlds, though gaps remained that could not yet be crossed. Yet the presence of the outside world was never far. Neighbors occasionally passed by the ranch, curious about the young woman living there. Some looked with suspicion, others with admiration. But all noticed the unusual partnership between John and Ahioka. John felt the weight of their judgment, though he did not always speak of it. He worried about how others would perceive them, about the challenges Ahioka might face in a world that did not understand her customs. Ahioka, meanwhile, sensed the unspoken tension but remained steadfast, relying on her inner strength to navigate a place that was foreign and often unwelcoming. One evening, as the sky turned a deep shade of orange and purple, John found Ahioka sitting outside the small cabin, staring at the horizon. He joined her, standing silently at first, letting the quiet evening wrap around them. Finally he spoke. "I keep thinking about what you said, about the bond, about life debts. I don't fully understand it yet." Ahioka turned to him, her face illuminated by the fading light. "You don't have to understand everything at once," she said. "You only have to see it, feel it, and respect it. That is enough for now." John nodded, though the words brought little comfort. He cared for her deeply, yet he did not know how to reconcile his own beliefs with hers. The thought of a life bound by custom rather than choice was foreign to him, yet he could not ignore the respect and trust she had earned. As spring gave way to early summer, life continued at the ranch with the rhythm of work, meals, and quiet evenings. Ahioka's presence brought a sense of life and warmth that John had not realized he was missing. They began to share small joys, the first bloom of a desert flower, the playful antics of a young calf, the quiet song of the wind through the grass. Each moment built a tapestry of connection, a foundation for something that neither of them could yet name, but both felt growing steadily. One day, a visitor arrived, a trader from a nearby settlement bringing supplies and news from the outside world. He spoke with John about the growing tensions between settlers and the local Apache communities, warning him to be careful and to keep the ranch safe. John listened politely, but he felt a strange sense of frustration. He had seen firsthand the kindness and wisdom of Ahioka. He had come to trust her judgment and rely on her presence. The trader's warnings reminded him that their lives existed in a larger, often harsh world, one that might never fully accept the bond forming between them. That night, as the desert sky darkened and stars sparkled overhead, John and Ahioka sat together outside. She held a small piece of cloth she had dyed with natural pigments, working quietly on a design she said symbolized protection and guidance. "This is for you," she said, pressing it into his hand. John examined the cloth, seeing the care and skill in each stitch. It was a gift, simple yet meaningful, and it made him realize that her gratitude and respect were not demands. They were gestures of trust, of recognition, and perhaps, in time, something deeper. Days passed, each filled with the ordinary yet extraordinary rhythms of ranch life. The bond between John and Ahioka deepened in subtle ways, through shared tasks, quiet conversation, and moments of laughter. Yet beneath the surface, the unspoken truth of her words lingered, a gentle tension that neither could ignore. John knew that a decision, or at least understanding, would come sooner or later. For now, they continued to build a life together, step by step, learning from each other, respecting each other, and slowly bridging the gap between their two very different worlds. Summer had settled fully over the Arizona desert, bringing long, warm days and cool, star-filled nights. The ranch thrived under John and Ahioka's care. The cattle were healthy, the horses strong, and the small vegetable garden flourished in the dry climate, thanks to Ahioka's careful attention to every plant. Yet, despite the outward calm, a quiet tension had begun to grow between them, subtle but impossible to ignore. Both knew that the bond forming between them was deeper than friendship, yet neither had spoken directly about it. One afternoon, a sudden storm rolled in from the west. Dark clouds moved quickly across the desert sky, and the wind began to whip through the canyon. The horses grew restless in the corral, and the cattle scattered slightly in the open field. John worked quickly, closing gates and securing the animals, while Ahioka moved with a quiet precision, calming the animals with her voice and steady hands. It was a dance they had performed many times before, but this storm was different, stronger, unpredictable, and closer to the ranch than any they had seen in recent memory. As lightning flashed across the horizon, a loud crack of thunder startled a young colt, causing it to bolt toward the fence. John and Ahioka sprang into action at the same moment. John ran after the horse, shouting its name, while Ahioka moved swiftly to intercept it, her hands reaching out to calm it. For a moment, time seemed to stretch. The horse was panicked. The wind whipped dust and sand into their faces, and the rain began to fall in heavy drops. John managed to grab the colt's reins, but it struggled, pulling him slightly off balance. Ahioka reached him just in time, placing her hand on his arm. "Hold steady," she shouted over the roar of the storm. Together, they guided the colt safely back into the corral. Breathing heavily, soaked from head to toe, they stood side by side, hearts racing, adrenaline still sharp. The storm began to pass, leaving the ranch dripping with rain, and the air filled with the scent of wet earth and grass. In the quiet that followed, John looked at Ahioka with new understanding. He had always respected her calm and courage, but seeing her act so fearlessly in the face of danger made him realize the depth of her character. She too looked at him differently, seeing not just the man who had saved her life, but the man who worked tirelessly to protect those around him, even when it was difficult or frightening. That evening, as the fire crackled in the small cabin, Ahioka spoke quietly. "Life is fragile," she said. "We cannot know what tomorrow will bring. That is why the bonds we make, the trust we give, are so important. We must—" John nodded, the weight of her words settling on him. He thought of the first days when he had found her injured, the long hours spent nursing her back to health, and the moments of quiet connection they had shared since. "You're right," he said. I have been thinking about what you told me. About the bond. About the life debt." He paused, unsure how to continue. "I don't know if I fully understand it yet, but I do know that I care for you more than I ever expected." "Care is the first step," she said. "Understanding comes next, and trust will follow. We are learning together." The next few weeks brought a mixture of calm and tension. Life at the ranch continued with the routines of feeding, repairing, and tending the land, but beneath the surface, Both John and Ayoka felt the pull of their unspoken feelings. They shared small moments of connection. A gentle touch on the shoulder, a shared laugh at a clumsy calf, a quiet look exchanged over a meal, but each moment was heavy with meaning they had not yet named aloud. One morning, as they were mending a section of fence near the edge of the property, John noticed Ayoka pausing to examine the ground. She knelt, brushing dirt away with her hands, and pointed to a small plant with delicate leaves. "This is a healing herb," she explained. "It can soothe pain if used correctly." John knelt beside her, intrigued. "I've never seen anything like it," he said. "You've taught me so much already." Ayoka smiled, a faint blush coloring her cheeks. "And you have shown me a new way to see this land." We learned from each other. Their growing bond was tested one afternoon when a traveling merchant arrived at the ranch. He brought news from the nearby settlement. Rumors that some settlers were questioning the presence of a young woman on a ranch without a family connection. The merchant spoke cautiously, not wanting to offend, but John felt a sudden tension tighten in his chest. He had long known that their situation was unusual, but hearing it confirmed in someone else's words made the reality unavoidable. Ayoka sensed his unease. "We cannot control what others think," she said softly. "We can only live with honor and care. That is enough." John nodded, though he could not shake the worry. The world beyond the ranch was unpredictable, and he feared for her safety, for both their reputations and for the fragile trust they had built. Days later, John faced a difficult moment of reflection. He realized that his feelings for Ayoka went beyond respect or gratitude. He admired her courage, her wisdom, and her kindness, but he also felt a warmth in his chest that could only be called affection. Yet the thought of a life bound by custom, of fulfilling a debt he did not fully understand, caused him hesitation. Could he bridge the gap between his world and hers? Could he accept a bond that was part duty and part emotion? These questions weighed heavily on him as he worked through the chores that day. Meanwhile, Ayoka, too, was struggling. She valued John not only for saving her life, but for the person he was, steadfast, compassionate, and willing to learn from her. Yet she feared that her customs, unfamiliar and often misunderstood by outsiders, might push him away. She wrestled with a quiet fear that expressing her feelings openly might change everything, might make him uncomfortable, or, worse, might make him leave. One evening after a long day of work and tending to the animals, a small crisis brought their emotions to the surface. A young foal had wandered too close to the edge of a small ravine, and despite their efforts, it became stuck in the soft soil. John and Ayoka ran to the foal together, carefully guiding it back to solid ground. As they worked side by side, their hands brushing occasionally, John realized how much he had come to rely on her presence, not just for help with work, but for comfort, for understanding, for companionship. Ayoka, in turn, saw the depth of his care, the protective instinct that was both practical and emotional. After the foal was safe, they sat together by the small creek near the edge of the property, water flowing gently over the stones. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow across the desert. For a long time, neither spoke, both lost in thought. Finally, John broke the silence. "I can't promise I understand everything about your customs," he said, "but I know that I respect them, and I know that I respect you." Ayoka looked at him, her eyes wide and steady. "Respect is the beginning," she said, "but feelings grow, slowly. Trust grows, and bonds, they become stronger when shared." John nodded, a sense of resolve settling over him. He realized that the storm, the foal, and every challenge they had faced together were not just tests. They were lessons. Lessons in patience, in understanding, in seeing the world through another's eyes. And in that understanding, he saw a path forward, a path that would not be easy, but one worth taking. The next morning, John took Ayoka aside as they tended the horses. "Ayoka," he began, his voice careful, "I want to try. I want to understand this bond you speak of. I want to be part of your world if you'll let me. Not just because I owe you, but because I care for you." Ayoka's face softened, relief and hope mingling in her expression. "That is all I could hope for," she said. "We will walk this path together, step by step. Nothing is rushed, nothing is forced, only trust and care." Over the next days, their relationship began to shift in subtle ways. There were quiet gestures of affection, a hand resting briefly on a shoulder, a shared smile over a small success with the animals, a meal prepared together with laughter. Their bond was no longer only about gratitude or duty. It was about connection, about learning to understand and care for another human being deeply. Yet the shadow of the outside world remained. John knew that others might not understand or approve, and Ahioka knew that her customs might be questioned. But together they realized that their choices, their care for each other, and their shared experiences were stronger than the fear of judgment. In that realization, they found courage, a courage that would carry them through the challenges yet to come. As the desert sun set on another day, John and Ahioka stood side by side on the small ridge overlooking the ranch. The wind was gentle, the sky painted in colors of gold, pink, and purple. They did not need words to understand the depth of their connection. It had been tested by storms, by fear, and by the weight of unspoken expectations, yet it had grown stronger, and in that strength they found hope. A hope that would guide them into whatever future awaited. The Arizona desert had settled into the quiet heat of late summer. The mornings were still cool, with soft sunlight spilling over the rocks and plains, but by midday the sun scorched the land, turning it a deep shade of gold. Life on the ranch had grown steady, almost peaceful, yet John and Ahioka knew that the bond forming between them had changed everything. Their connection was no longer a matter of gratitude or necessity. It was becoming a partnership, rooted in trust, care, and a shared understanding of the world around them. The morning began as it usually did, with John checking the animals and Ahioka gathering fresh herbs and vegetables for breakfast. As they worked, there was a calmness in the air, a rhythm that had taken weeks to develop. John noticed how naturally Ahioka moved through the ranch, her presence blending with the land, the animals, and even the soft rustle of the wind through the grass. She seemed part of the world itself, and he felt a profound gratitude that she had chosen to remain by his side. After breakfast, they began tending the fields. Ahioka showed John a new technique for watering the plants efficiently, explaining the subtle differences between the desert soil and the richer earth near the creek. John listened attentively, appreciating the knowledge she brought with her. In turn, he shared tips on balancing work with the care of the animals, teaching her how to notice small changes in behavior that could indicate a horse or cow needed attention. Their conversations flowed easily, filled with laughter, curiosity, and quiet observations. They spoke of the future, not just the coming seasons on the ranch, but the life they could build together if they chose to. John found himself opening up in ways he had not imagined, sharing dreams he had long buried, expanding the ranch, creating a small orchard, and having a home filled with warmth and laughter. Ahioka listened with attentive eyes, encouraging him, asking questions, and offering her own ideas. Their plans were modest, but for both of them, they carried the promise of stability and companionship that had been missing from their lives. One afternoon, while repairing the section of the fence near the northern edge of the property, a traveler approached the ranch. He was an older man carrying a small bag of supplies and news from the nearby settlements. He greeted John politely and nodded toward Ahioka. "I've heard of this partnership," he said carefully. "Some people have questions about it." John exchanged a glance with Ahioka, who simply nodded. "We live as we must," she said quietly. "The rest will understand in time." The man hesitated, then smiled. "It's good to see trust and respect in action," he said. "Not everyone knows how to do that anymore." With a nod, he moved on, leaving John and Ahioka to continue their work. The encounter reminded them that their lives were still subject to the judgments and misunderstandings of others, but it also reinforced their resolve to build their own life together, grounded in mutual respect and understanding. As the week passed, John and Ahioka faced small challenges that tested their partnership in different ways. One day, a young calf wandered off toward the hills, and they had to work together to guide it safely back to the ranch. Another day, a section of the roof leaked during a sudden rainstorm, and they spent hours patching it with tar and wood. In each situation, they relied on each other's strengths, the patience and insight of Ahioka, the strength and practicality of John. With every challenge, their trust deepened, their connection strengthened, and their understanding of one another grew more profound. One evening, after a long day of work, they sat together outside the cabin, watching the sunset cast brilliant colors over the desert. The air was still, and the only sound was the distant call of a bird and the gentle rustle of the wind through the grass. John turned to Ahioka, his voice soft but firm. "I have been thinking," he began, "about everything you told me. About life debts, bonds, and trust. I realize that my feelings for you are more than gratitude. I care for you deeply, Ahioka. I want to be with you not because I owe you, but because I choose you." Ahioka's eyes glistened in the fading light. She reached for his hand, holding it gently but firmly. "I have felt the same way," she said. I have respected you, cared for you, and watched you with admiration. Your kindness, your courage, your willingness to understand my world. It has touched me deeply. I choose you as well." The words, spoken softly yet with certainty, carried a weight that seemed to fill the entire desert around them. It was a moment of clarity, a moment when the unspoken tension of weeks melted away into understanding and shared commitment. They sat together for a long time, holding hands and watching the stars emerge in the clear night sky. In the following days, preparations began for a small ceremony to formalize their bond in a way that respected both of their worlds. Ahioka shared customs from her people, explaining how small rituals honored the bond between two individuals. John contributed ideas from his own background, creating a blend of traditions that symbolized mutual respect, commitment, and love. Together, they crafted a simple but meaningful ceremony attended only by themselves and the animals they cared for, reflecting the quiet intimacy of their shared life. On the day of the ceremony, the desert was calm, bathed in golden sunlight. John and Ahioka stood together near the edge of the ridge, overlooking the wide expanse of the land that had brought them together. Ahioka carried a small bundle of herbs, and John held a piece of cloth he had carefully prepared. They exchanged words that were simple, heartfelt, and true to the lessons they had learned about trust, care, and partnership. "I promise to walk beside you," John said, "to honor and respect you, and to face life's challenges together." "I promise the same," Ahioka replied, "to share my life with you, to honor our bond, and to grow with you." The ceremony was brief but profound. As they stood together, hands intertwined, the desert wind carried away any lingering doubts or fears. The bond they had forged through shared experiences, challenges, and understanding was now openly acknowledged, celebrated, and honored. In the weeks that followed, life on the ranch settled into a new rhythm. John and Ahioka worked together seamlessly, their partnership strengthened by the formal recognition of their bond. The animals thrived under their care, the fields flourished, and the small home they had built together became a place of warmth, laughter, and comfort. Their days were filled with work, learning, and shared joy, and their nights with quiet conversation, star-filled skies, and the satisfaction of a life built together. Neighbors and travelers who passed by the ranch began to notice the changes as well. There was respect in their eyes, an acknowledgement of the partnership that had grown not from obligation, but from choice and care. Some came to learn from them, asking questions about the land, the animals, and the ways in which John and Ahioka worked together. Others simply smiled and continued on, leaving the couple to their peaceful life, now strengthened by understanding, mutual respect, and love. As the seasons turned, John and Ahioka faced occasional challenges, storms, difficult repairs, and unexpected setbacks, but they faced them together, relying on the lessons of patience, understanding, and trust they had learned. Each obstacle became an opportunity to strengthen their bond, to learn more about each other, and to reaffirm the commitment they had made. One evening, as autumn approached and the air turned crisp with the promise of cooler nights, John and Ahioka stood together on the ridge once more. The sun was setting in a brilliant display of oranges, pinks, and purples, and the desert seemed to stretch endlessly before them. They watched in silence, feeling the connection that had grown between them over months of shared work, challenges, and quiet moments of understanding. "I never imagined life could be like this," John said softly. "I thought the ranch would always be quiet, empty, and lonely. But with you, everything feels full, alive, worthwhile." Ahioka smiled, her hand resting on his arm. "Life is full when shared," she said. "When we honor each other, trust each other, and care for one another. That is what makes life meaningful." The two stood together for a long time, letting the desert wind carry their thoughts and the warmth of their shared bonds settle over them. They knew the world beyond the ranch might never fully understand their union, but they also knew that their choice, their trust, and their love for each other were enough. Together, they had built a life, a home, and a bond that would endure no matter what challenges came their way. As night fell, the stars began to sparkle in the clear desert sky, reflecting in their eyes and in the small stream that ran along the edge of the property. The ranch, the animals, and the land itself seemed to hum with quiet approval, bearing witness to a partnership born of trust, courage, and love. John and Ahioka turned toward their home, walking side by side, ready to face whatever the future held, knowing they would do so together. Life on the ranch continued, simple yet profound. Each day brought work and challenges, but also laughter, learning, and the quiet joy of shared companionship. John and Ahioka's bond grew stronger with every sunrise and sunset, every meal shared, every animal cared for, and every story told under the star-filled sky. They had come together through chance, circumstance, and courage, and in doing so they had found something rare and precious, a life built on respect, understanding, and love that could withstand the tests of time and the trials of the world around them. And so, in the wide, sunlit desert, the ranch thrived, the animals flourished, and two lives intertwined, creating a story of hope, resilience, and enduring companionship, a story that would be remembered not for its struggles alone, but for the love and trust that grew from them, stronger with each passing day.